Good morning, Jan. How are you doing? Nice to see you. How's lockdown?
Well, yeah, lockdown is still an exciting period where where
Great,
we
great to hear that. Great to hear that. So, how is business from your side and um, from your perspective with respect to the services and the product that you offer? How did it help businesses at this stage?
well, that's a good question because uh, the whole period that the uncertainty that we now live in um, for the customers that we deal with is actually not a great period at all. The customers that we deal with are training companies, and training companies generally train in a classroom, and therefore have seen fall their business off a cliff as classroom training doesn't happen anymore since a number of weeks, of course. Um, on the other hand, these classroom-based training companies now are looking to bring their business online and to create a more online business. To do that well, you need some kind of technology, whether you use Zoom for webinars or GoToMeeting or WebEx, or you use a more sophisticated training program to create a blended learning environment. And that's where we come in. So we've received a lot of questions from customers or potential customers about this. So we've been quite busy in this period, and I'm glad that we've been able to help quite a few organizations to continue or restart their business during this period.
Fantastic. So, how does the blended learning in New Spring, is it? How do you help those businesses? What sort of businesses do you work with? If you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, the platform indeed is aNew Spring, and the type of companies that we work with are indeed, training providers. So any training provider that wants to bring their business online or in a blended format, they can create the blended learning and then deliver that blended learning to their learners. Whether that's via an e-commerce model or instructor-led or with just an online version of that, they can do all that within the platform.
And what makes New Spring, what is the target market for New Spring? What sort of companies do you usually assist or work with?
Very much training organizations. That could be a training company, training providers, as we call them, mostly independent training providers, but there are also some large corporates that use us, for example, for their customer training. A great example could be Mercedes-Benz training their dealerships. So their customers, for example, in the Netherlands. There are software companies that use us to train their customers in the use of that software, or there are training companies that do financial training or food safety training, compliance training. So different types of sectors, different types of markets that these companies address. But that's across the board. But the theme, I would say, the core of our business is organizations that train their customers, and most of them are training companies.
Excellent. I know some of the meeting, the webinar softwares that are available, and not much flexibility with many of them, but some of them have a capacity for attendees, let's say for 100 people, or some have 1,000 or whatever. So how many attendees can interact with a specific session on New Spring currently?
Well, that's a good point. Scalability is often a question that we get asked, because if you train people in a classroom, you get between 10 and 30 people maybe that you reach. However, when you are delivering online, whether you do that in a blended fashion or purely via e-learning, your scalability, of course, is huge. You can reach people all around the globe. That means that you could have thousands of people taking your courses at the same time. We're a very scalable platform. We have over 1 million learners within our platform. So scalability is definitely possible with your business as well.
That's fantastic, to be honest. But we've talked a lot about the software, but we missed the man behind the software. So tell us a little bit about you and your experience, and how do you add value?
Well, the way I add value is basically experience within this industry. I've worked in front of a classroom, so I know what it is to be a trainer. I've been, for the last 20 years, working in e-learning, learning technologies for large leading organizations in this world. And I think that has given me a wide and broad experience in this sector, in the training, in the e-learning, the learning technology sectors. But it also made me a big fan of what I would call the blended learning. Online learning is great for scalability, for consistency of your message. But sometimes it's great to see the question mark in somebody's eyes, and only you can do that as an instructor. So that's what makes me a big fan of the blended learning element.
Just as a final note, what would be your advice to these training companies that haven't jumped on the blended learning platforms, and they are still using the primary, let's say, softwares, or the what we call the cheaper options?
Yeah, look, there are choices out there. If somebody Googles the term learning management system or learning content management system, in which categories I guess we fall, then you probably find 1,000 systems in this world. So there is a lot of choice. Actually, there's too much choice, because which one is right for you? I would argue that more than 90% of these systems are actually for internal corporate staff training. That's what they're made for. Just have a look at their messaging, their marketing messaging, and if they talk about staff training or training your employees, then you know that they are for that market. However, there is a small subset of platforms that are for certain segments, for example, schools or colleges or universities, or there are platforms for specific purposes, such as the apprenticeship market. But however, aNew Spring is actually in a unique position that we are for training providers. And that makes us a niche player, but very relevant for that particular sector of the market.
That is brilliant and an interesting fruits for thoughts. Thank you so much for this today. I'm sure that everybody that listens to what you've just said will have great value. And keep safe, and wish you well. And till we meet in person again, have a great weekend.
Thank you. Same to you. And thank you for your time.
Thanks. Thanks.